Welcome to our daily reflection for this Thursday, July 25th. And today, the Lord has a great word for us and this powerful image that's used from St. Paul in our first reading, where he is writing in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, and he talks about how we hold this treasure in earthen vessels or clay jars, depending on your translation. And I love this image of this treasure that we have of God's grace in the physical body that we have. It is, in a sense, a treasure. Our soul is in this body, this physical body. And Paul uses this metaphor of clay jars. And what does he mean by that? Well, the term in Greek, skuos, is a term used for the clay jars that were used in the temple to carry the sacrifices throughout the temple. That would be the offerings in sacrifice to God. And so what's really unique is Paul also then spiritualizes our own sacrifices and offerings to God. In other words, our body are like these clay jars. They're made out of clay with a body, and we are offering sacrifice to God every day with all of our suffering and sacrifices that we do to fulfill the will of God and to love our neighbor and God. And so it's a really beautiful image, if you think about it, that you have a priestly vocation every day and that you have a priestly opportunity, that in your sufferings, when you have to maybe lose sleep for the sake of your kids, or to give up free time for the sake of a neighbor, to help a neighbor, or to help the poor, or to volunteer somewhere, to do any act of charity, that these good works that require sacrifice and might be painful or cause some kind of offering is something that we can offer up to God in worship. And so Paul talks about how we have this treasure, that is God's grace, our soul, in these jars of clay. And this is to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to ourselves. In other words, this great work of grace that God is going to do in us, the fact that we are weighed down by a physical body that declines, is to give us humility, but to show also God's strength. And so in our weakness, Paul learns, God's glory and strength is manifest. And so this should give us courage and strength, that we could we easily at the end of the day, we could be tired. We just want to rest and relax. And yet we're called upon to serve our spouse, our family, our friends, our children. And, now it's time to offer it up, as we say in the Catholic faith. And that tradition of offering up goes back to these very passages of Paul, who talks about how we are to make a sacrifice of ourselves. And then, of course, this takes faith. And that's what we get to in the second half of this reading from Paul, when he quotes from Psalm 116, I believed and therefore I spoke. In other words, Paul says, look, we might be perplexed, we might be constrained, we might be afflicted, but we never despair. Why? Because our faith in God. And we know that God, who raised Jesus from the dead, will overcome our own physical limitations and our own physical dying eventually to give us life in Christ. And so that the life of Christ may be manifest in the midst of our human weakness is what Paul is pointing to, and that's going to take supernatural faith. And we won't speak this way if we don't believe in our hearts. And so today, let's take it into our meditation that you have a poor jar of clay, which is your physical body, and yet that's not to be a hindrance to living a life of charity and supernatural love and service to others. It just gives you an opportunity to sacrifice, and that is a beautiful thing indeed. May the Lord bless and keep you.
This daily reflection is brought to you thanks to the generous support of the Mission Circle. Join the Mission Circle to help Catholics worldwide understand, live, and share their faith. Sign up at missioncircle.org today.